So I've been making GIFs of old school retro games, and I thought I'd take some time to put stars next to 20 random Atari 2600 titles, in no particular order. Kaboom was the first game I revisited on my trip down memory lane. You play as 3 buckets that need to catch bombs being dropped by a terrorist at the top of the grassy knoll. The speed dials back a level after each miss, and it's pretty visceral once you get a hang of the joystick, which should be held like a dial on contemporary controls, in case you want to play the game for historical research or educational purposes. Video games of the past didn't always have the luxury of real graphics, so once the developers were able to create some sort of perceived movement, they left the rest black and slapped the title on it like Night Driver. It has a good sense of speed and quite a nice analog feel to it, considering it's just one gas button and steering, but it made me a bit nauseous after 90 seconds. There were a few 2600 titles where the mascot was accurately portrayed in the game, and Taz is one of those exceptions. You chase around food as a spinning tornado while avoiding dynamite. The snacks change after every 50 you grab, and the difficulty ramps up significantly after the poopsicles. All this plus solid controls, reskinned as Asterix over in Europe. Adventure has you moving a square around an ugly castle while being chased by a seahorse. You need to find keys and do something with the drawbridge. There are 3 skill modes that mix things up by adding a bat, an invisible area, and random key placement. You really need to wear your tinted glasses of nostalgia if you want to revisit this adventure, unless you want to develop cataracts. Berzerk is a twin-stick shooter before they invented twin sticks, so you need to shoot in the direction your hand is facing, and hide behind walls to avoid incoming fire. But don't touch the walls or you'll have your eardrums blown out if you're a headphone user. Vertical movement is slower than horizontal, which feels odd and makes it hard to dodge bullets, even when you see them coming, not to mention the floating quaalude that chases you. Yars' Revenge is one of the most surreal experiences in the history of video games. The sound effects, tripped out visuals, and unusual but solid gameplay makes you wonder if this is how the universe began. You gotta shoot the barrier and touch the co-tile so a bullet flies across the screen and hits it. It makes sense if you're on acid, so give it a go sometime. Yars' Revenge, I mean. Speaking of acid, some user on the Discord group recommended Solaris, which is a journey in and of itself. This is definitely one of the more sophisticated games I've tried on the 2600, with maps and radar and multiple game phases. I'm not quite sure what to make of it completely, but I was able to explore a large chunk of the universe before getting killed, and the controls and depth perception are good. Look into Solaris if you haven't yet. River Raid is another title that gets a lot of things right. The speed up and slow down is used to good effect, because it moves the screen faster or slower, which is actually better compared to how it was done on most shooters, where the screen was at a fixed velocity and the plane moved up and down. Remember, you can shoot the fuel tanks for extra points, because I know all of you are still sitting on the couch taking turns playing 2600 games. E.T. has you roaming around in Argyle sweater, looking for Reese's Feces. There's a guy in a trench coat and a doctor trying to molest you, and a bathtub you need to keep climbing out of. You need to pick up parts of a phone so you can call home, and if you press a button, you can warp between screens. It's all very cryptic, and I still can't comprehend what the hell is going on after reading the manual twice. We all know this game is rubbish, but it's intriguing enough to dick around with for a while, so it's not at the bottom of the abyss as far as 2600 games go. The worst offenders of the 2600 catalog were the ones that were completely unplayable, even for the time, like video chess. First of all, there's no motion involved, so the term video is misleading. Second, I like chess, but it's clear from the start that the Atari 2600 iteration was never going to work. The controls suck, and the computer takes too long to move, up to 10 hours on the highest skill level, which I believe would cause the console to catch fire. Any game that requires me to burn down my home is bottom tier. The saddest thing about the Atari 2600 is that its best-selling game is one of the biggest disappointments. Pac Man on the Atari is a lousy port of an all-time arcade classic, and this was during Atari's crackdown on clones in the emerging maze game genre. Aside from the ugly graphics, flickering ghosts, and not-so-amazing maze, they could have at least attempted to draw some fruits. All we get is a piece of cardboard. Activision was adamant that porting over arcade games to home consoles was the wrong approach, so original titles like Pitfall were tailored to the strengths of the 2600. What you end up with is an extremely polished platformer that used clever programming to generate a relatively large world for such a small amount of memory. The object is to collect 32 pieces of treasure in under 20 minutes. You can run left to make your quest easier. The underground tunnels transport you ahead 3 screens, so don't trip out when the environment changes. Missile Command is another Atari game that didn't quite port right from arcade to home console. There's only one anti-missile base instead of 3, and there's no planes or UFOs, only missiles and bird shit. And they can't destroy your ammo. It makes the game more manageable, so I guess it's better for noobs, but it's not the crazy challenge I enjoy from the arcade. Atlantis solves some of the problems with programming a Missile Command style game to a one-button control. Instead, you have 3 bases that fire in set directions, and you move the joystick left, right, and center to choose where you want to fire from. It's an elegant solution that lends itself to an entirely new result, and it's fun to switch turrets to shoot down the Rainbow Space Force. Jungle Hunt is one of those multifaceted retro games, containing 3 stages with totally different gameplay designs. First you're swinging on ropes, then you're swimming with crocodiles, and finally you're jumping over boulders and aborigines. It's all a big repeating loop like most second-gen games, and I still have the killer soundtrack playing in my head to this day. Keystone Capers has you running around a shopping mall chasing a robber who just stole a prison costume from the Halloween shop. Security is on their smoke break, so rioters are hurling shopping carts and flying RC copters into your forehead. There's an elevator that helps if you can time it right, but the guy will run in the opposite direction if he's behind. And you can't go down the escalator because that would be breaking the rules. Turmoil was the answer to Tempest for the 2600 that Atari just didn't have at the time. It plays, looks, and sounds like the arcade classic, only it takes place on a series of horizontal lines. The enemies are just as weird, and there's a gyrating orifice you're supposed to collect before it zaps back and forth. There's a trippy number screen that tells you what level it is, but I didn't really notice the difference until level 4, when something went missing. I have a love-hate relationship with Frogger, especially the flickery 2600 version. The floating circles on the river are supposed to be turtles, not lily pads, and it's the red ones that are safe to stand on, and blue ones that sink. I sometimes question the collision detection, especially in the river, and aren't frogs able to swim anyway? Kangaroo reminds me of Donkey Kong, only harder, and you got a lot of animals throwing fecal matter from different directions. You can ring the bell if you want to replenish the fruits, which might be the first instance of grinding for points in a video game. There are 3 different stages, but it's just as fun to stick around and make the fruit change as it is to continue to the next level. Winter Games was released pretty late in the life of the 2600, but it's actually better than its Nintendo NES counterpart. There's 7 events, and all of them are at least good, and some are more intuitive than others. The bobsled and luge have silky controls and a top sense of speed, while the ski jump and biathlons require a quick peek at the instruction manual, but are worthwhile if you can actually convince some lost souls into trying it out together. As you may have noticed, I didn't play too many crappy Atari 2600 games, as I have greater challenges to overcome at this time. And most of the real garbage on this console isn't that gifable anyway. So if you want to catch some loops or even throw in a request, join the Discord or follow me on minds.com, where you can track the latest stuff from Game Test Play.